She didn't know I was home. That's where everything starts. It was a Thursday, warm, dull, one of those days that feel like nothing's supposed to happen. ID left work early without telling anyone, not because I planned to snoop, but because the silence in my head had started to hum. It had been building for weeks. You know when your instincts aren't screaming, but whispering? That low, quiet murmur that eats through your sleep, through your patience, through the skin of everyday life? That had been my world for almost a month. She thought I was at the client dinner across town. I was supposed to be shaking hands and sipping wine. Instead, I was standing in the hallway of my own house, behind the coat closet door, listening to her on the phone in the kitchen. She had her back to me. She was laughing, soft, breathy, too careful. Like the sound you make when you want someone to know you're smiling with your lips, not your heart. Yeah, I know. I miss you too. She paused, tilted her head slightly, leaned against the fridge like she'd done that move before many times. Not for me. No, he's clueless, she said, dragging out the word like it amused her. He thinks I'm going to Megan's. I told him she's going through some stuff. He even offered to pick her up himself. Imagine that. I could see her hand play with her necklace. She only did that when she was trying to sound innocent. Then, after another moment, she said something that didn't just crack the ground beneath me. It tore it open. I'll bring the wine. Same place as last time. Same place as last time. My body didn't jolt. No shaking hands, no gasps. Just a strange, tight stillness. Like time folded in on itself. I realized I hadn't taken a breath in 20 seconds. The house was too quiet, like it knew something ugly had crept into its walls. She hung up, turned, and called out my name. Out of habit, maybe. Her voice traveled through the house, light and unbothered. I didn't answer. She left 10 minutes later. I watched her walk to her car through the front blinds, humming as she scrolled her phone. I knew I couldn't follow her, not yet. That wasn't the plan. I needed something stronger than rage. I needed proof. You see, this didn't come out of nowhere. I'd been piecing things together, but I didn't want to believe it. Not until now. The late-night drives, the long showers with locked doors, the random mood swings, the forgotten lies. And always her eyes never landing on mine long enough. Like she was guilty of something she hadn't been caught doing yet. I sat down on the living room couch and called Megan. The real Megan. She picked up after 3 rings. Hey, what's up? Her voice was too chipper for someone going through stuff. I didn't play dumb. Just wondering how you're doing. Heard from my wife that you needed some support. There was a pause. I imagined her looking around, confused, processing the bomb I just casually slid across the table. I don't know what she told you, but I haven't seen her in like 3 weeks. We texted once. Everything okay? I told her everything was fine and hung up. Then I got to work. I opened my laptop. All the audio backups from the Bluetooth tracker I'd slipped into her car key fob were there. 2 weeks worth of location logs and phone call audio. The tracker wasn't new. I didn't install it out of suspicion. I installed it months ago, during a stretch when her car kept getting lost in random parking tickets. I thought she was bad with directions. Turns out she was just somewhere else. I queued the files. There were more than I expected. Laughter, whispers, names I didn't recognize. One stood out. A man's voice I didn't know, calling her baby. She called him Mr. B once. Another time, G. Most of the conversations were cut off by short bursts of music. But one recording from 5 days ago made my hand curl into a fist on the table. He said he missed me today, she giggled. I almost laughed in his face. He wouldn't survive one day if I actually left. He's soft. He needs me. That's the thing, he doesn't even realize how much. That was the first moment I realized she wasn't just cheating. She had contempt for me. This wasn't confusion or some mistake or midlife boredom. She'd already flipped the switch in her head. She'd already turned me into a ghost she thought she could feed lines to. She didn't respect me. She didn't fear getting caught. So I decided to show her what it looks like when a ghost watches everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed bags. But not mine. She came home the next night at 1:43 a.m. I was already in the living room. Lights off. Screen glowing. A silent clip paused on my laptop, grainy but clear. The interior of a hotel hallway. Her. And the man. The camera was angled from above, ceiling corner, probably part of the hotel's security system. I paid for the footage, didn't even flinch when the guy I found online named his price. A friend of mine does IT security for hotels and passed me the contact. These places record everything. You just need to know how to ask. When she unlocked the door, I didn't move. She didn't notice me at first. She walked in carrying her heels in one hand, phone in the other, laughing softly at some text she didn't think anyone else would ever see. Then she looked up. Our eyes met. She froze, half in the doorway. You could actually see her soul leave her body for a second. The lights from the street hit her face through the blinds behind me, casting her in this sharp silhouette like a painting of someone caught mid-lie. "You're home?" she said, voice low, carefully wrapping itself in innocence. I didn't say anything. I just turned the laptop toward her and hit play. The audio wasn't great, but the image spoke volumes. Her backing up against a hotel room door. Him reaching out. Her mouth moving into his neck. Then their shadows merging as the door opened and they disappeared inside. Timestamp. 9:22 p.m. 3 hours ago. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even act surprised. She just stared at it. Then at me. Like she was waiting to see which direction I'd explode in. But I didn't. Instead, I pointed toward the couch. "Sit." She did. Slowly. Like the couch had turned into some sort of courtroom bench. I sat opposite her. 3 feet of carpet between us. But it felt like an ocean. My voice was so calm. I surprised myself. "Tell me his name." She scoffed. Scoffed. Like I just asked if she believed in aliens. "Seriously?" she said, blinking fast. "You're being dramatic." That word. That tone. Triggered something. I leaned forward. "Tell me his name." "Why does it matter?" she said with this sick, amused little smirk. "You've clearly been spying on me like some obsessed." I stood up so fast she flinched. Not from fear. From the sudden realization that the man she thought was soft had reached his limit. "You've been lying to me in my own house," I said. "Lying to your kids. Gaslighting me for months. And you're sitting here smirking?" She looked away, jaw clenched. I noticed her hands gripping her thighs tightly. It was the first time she'd lost control of her body language. That told me she wasn't just playing a role. She was unraveling. "Okay," she muttered. "You want the truth? Fine." She looked me dead in the eye. "His name's Greg. He's my boss. And before you ask, no, it's not just once. It's been going on for over 6 months. Every trip, every late night, every fake emergency. Yeah, that was him." She said it like she was proud. Like she thought her honesty now bought her some moral ground. "Why?" That was the only word I could form. She didn't answer right away. She looked past me. Somewhere distant. Then she laughed. Low, tired, bitter. "Because he made me feel alive. And because you stopped paying attention. You became routine. Predictable. Safe." She shook her head. "You worshipped me like a trophy. I hated it." That landed like a punch. Not because it was true, but because she believed it. I stood there, the weight of those words trying to dig into my spine, but I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't let her rewrite the story. So I walked down the hall, opened the bedroom door, and called out softly, "Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. You can come now." She didn't understand at first. But then she saw it. Our daughter. 12 years old, red-eyed, in pajamas, holding a folder in her trembling hands. She walked up to her mother without saying a word, and handed her the divorce papers. Then, crying, she said, "You're not welcome here anymore." The silence that followed wasn't silence. It was the sound of everything collapsing. And still, she sat there, in shock. Like she didn't understand that the lies she'd planted had finally bloomed. That the mask she wore for so long had fused with her face. And now we all saw it clearly. She thought she had time. She thought she had control. But she didn't realize I'd already packed her bags. She didn't speak. Not even a word. Her eyes flicked from the divorce papers in our daughter's hand to the bags sitting by the front door. 2 suitcases and a gym duffel she hadn't used since Cancun last summer, now packed by someone who knew exactly where everything she didn't deserve was. Her mouth opened once. No sound. Just a weak tremor of her jaw, like she wanted to say something clever, or maybe soften the scene with one of those manipulative little rewrites she was so good at. But this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a sentence. And she knew it. "You're serious?" She finally managed, almost laughing. Like this was some insane prank. "You're actually kicking me out?" In front of her. I didn't blink. She stood up, looking for traction. Some moral high ground. "She's a child. You dragged her into this? Do you realize what you've done to her?" It was that moment where I realized how far gone she really was. She wasn't broken about what she did. She was furious that she got caught in front of her audience. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. Scrambling for a narrative that made her the wounded party. I pointed to the door. "I didn't drag her into anything. You did. Every time you walked through that door with someone else's scent on your skin, every time you looked me in the eye and lied, she was already watching. You just thought she was too young to see it." Our daughter was still standing in the hallway. Silent. Frozen. Her tiny hands clenched at her sides, not out of fear, but out of shame that wasn't hers to carry. That's when the bedroom door creaked open again. My sons, 9 and 6, stepped out. They'd heard everything. Of course they had. Kids aren't stupid. They always know when something's wrong. They just don't always know how to ask about it. She turned and saw them. And for a second, I swear to you, only then did her face truly crack. She reached for the youngest. "Baby." He stepped behind his brother. Then the oldest, voice shaking, said, "Dad said you were at Megan's." Her face dropped. The lie finally met the ears it wasn't meant for. The silence between them broke like glass. She stumbled back like she'd been struck, but no one touched her. She realized there was nothing left to hold. Not the marriage. Not the family. Not even the illusion of being the mother they thought she was. She looked at me again. Eyes narrow. The guilt gone, replaced by something colder. "This is how you play it?" she hissed. "Turn the kids against me? Paint me as some villain and pretend you're the saint?" "I didn't paint anything," I said. "I just stopped covering your mess." She stared at me for what felt like a full minute. Then she laughed, a dry, bitter thing that carried nothing but venom. "You'll regret this." I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because that was the last card she had. Regret. She picked up her bags like they were weighted with bricks. No one helped her. Not out of malice, but because there was nothing left to offer her. Nothing left that hadn't already been poisoned by her own hand. As she opened the front door, I stepped forward one last time. "You can keep lying to yourself. Say whatever you want to your lover. But tonight, right here, your family saw you for who you are." She didn't reply. She walked out without closing the door. And just like that, she was gone. But the wreckage? That stayed. After the door shut behind her, the house didn't feel quiet, it felt abandoned. And not because she left. No. It was like something darker had slipped out with her, something heavy that had been living in the corners of the walls for months. For the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel like it was watching me. The kids were still up. My daughter curled up on the couch with her knees tucked to her chest, staring blankly at the floor. My boys sat on either side of her, not speaking, just breathing, trying to process a version of reality that had shattered like cheap glass in less than an hour. I crouched in front of them. "No more lies," I said. "From anyone. Ever again." My daughter nodded slowly, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. That crushed me more than the betrayal. She'd handed her mother the divorce papers, but that strength was fueled by pain no kid should ever be forced to hold. She was braver than she should have had to be. I tucked them into my bed that night, all 3 of them, the way I used to when they were little and the thunder scared them. The storm wasn't outside this time, though. It was in our blood, in their memories. In every future bedtime when one of them would glance at the hallway and remember that their mom had chosen someone else over them. After they fell asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. No lights, just the low hum of the fridge and the clock ticking in that infuriatingly calm rhythm like nothing had happened. I stared at my phone for a long time, not because I wanted to call her, That option had expired forever. But because I knew something was off. See, for someone who was so smug, so composed, even in the face of being exposed, her reaction felt too clean. Too calculated. The way she smiled when she said his name. The way she tried to shift the blame. The way she didn't ask a single question about what I'd seen or how I found out. She expected me to know. She wanted me to. I opened the laptop again. Rewatched the footage. Not because I needed to relive it, but because I needed to see what I'd missed. And there it was. A reflection in the hotel window right before the door opened. A second man. Not Greg. Not the one she called Mr. B. This one wore a gray hoodie and a baseball cap. Holding a phone. Filming them. The angle was too clean. Too deliberate. I paused it. Zoomed in. His face never turned toward the camera, but the way he moved, it was like he was directing a scene, not sneaking a peek. I felt a rush of something sharp. Not jealousy. Not fear. Strategy. This wasn't just cheating. This was organized. There was more than one player. More than one secret. And if she was dumb enough to walk out like that, calm and cold, knowing her kids would never forget her for it, then maybe this wasn't just about love, or lust, or boredom. Maybe she had something to gain. Or worse, maybe she'd already taken it. The next morning started like a movie where the audio doesn't match the picture. Birds chirping. Sunlight pouring through the windows. And under it all, a kind of psychological static I couldn't shake. Because while my house looked like any other suburban Friday morning, my head was already 10 moves ahead in a game I hadn't realized I was playing. I made breakfast like I always did. Eggs, toast, fruit. The boys ate in silence. My daughter didn't touch her plate. Her eyes were swollen but dry now, like her tears had given up. She kept her arms crossed, her mouth tight, and I didn't push. I knew she needed time. But deep inside me, a new kind of fire had started burning. Not heartbreak. Not even anger. Focus. After I got the kids to school, I sat in my car in the lot for 20 minutes, staring at the dashboard, running back every detail of the night before. The second man in the hotel reflection, the way she didn't panic, the way she looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she didn't need anymore. So I called a name I hadn't touched in 5 years, Tyler. Old friend from college. Used to run in gray zones, IT, surveillance, information recovery. Basically a genius with no moral compass and a very specific hobby, unearthing the things people don't want you to find. Whoa, he said when he picked up. You died or something? Something like that, I said. I've got a mess. I need eyes on someone. He didn't even ask who. I'll send you a link. Upload what you have. Video, audio, locations, dates. I'll scrape her digital trail and see what floats. I hung up and did exactly that. Footage. GPS logs. Call metadata. Even a screen recording of her Instagram activity because, surprise, surprise, she hadn't blocked me yet. Either she didn't care or she wanted me watching. And guess what? That same morning I found out what she really wanted. At exactly 10:42 a.m. I got a call from my bank's fraud alert line. Sir, did you authorize a wire transfer of $4,500 from your joint checking to an account ending in 9037? No, I did not. I logged into the app instantly. 3 transfers. 1 last night. 2 smaller ones this morning. Total, just under $9,000. Cleaned out the travel savings fund we'd built together. Her name was still on the account. Technically legal. Morally? Nuclear. I called her. No answer. I texted her, you stole from our kids. You stole from me. Return it or I go to the police. A full hour passed. Then she replied. It's not theft. My name's on it. Don't be dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. Her favorite word when she wanted to downplay the damage she caused. And then right below it, the final nail, maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to humiliate me in front of the kids. Actions have consequences. Welcome to yours. She didn't care. Not about them. Not about the marriage. Not even about hiding it anymore. She thought she'd won. But that was before Tyler called back. Yo, he said, voice low. We got something. She's not just seeing Greg. What do you mean? I mean she's seeing Greg and Ethan and one more guy whose name I'm still digging up. They all work for the same company. But get this, 2 of them have access to high-tier financial accounts. Private investment pools. I sat up straight. She's after money. Bro, Tyler said. I think she's part of something. I couldn't breathe for a second. I looked around the car like the windows were suddenly see-through. Like the whole world had been watching me get played. You're telling me this wasn't just some emotional affair? He snorted. Nah, man. Your wife's running a con. And just like that, the betrayal stopped being personal. It became a puzzle. One I was going to solve. And when I did, I wouldn't just destroy her lies, I'd dismantle the entire house of cards she thought she built behind my back. Tyler doesn't exaggerate. If he says someone's running a con, there's already a spreadsheet. Within 2 hours, he compiled a web of connections that made me realize how deep this rabbit hole went. Names, IP addresses, social media overlaps, travel records, dummy LLCs. I wasn't married to a cheating wife. I was married to a woman who'd spent the last year building an exit strategy that didn't include me or the kids. She wasn't just preparing to leave. She was cashing out. Her affair with Greg, the boss, was real. But Ethan, he was the finance guy, access to company funds. And the third guy, still just a face in a few photos, was probably the cleaner. The kind of person who handles logistics, hotel bookings, fake invoices, burner phones. They were targeting people. Men like me. Men who were stable, boring, trustworthy. Men who wouldn't see the red flags until it was too late. And now that I'd exposed her personally, she had activated the second phase. Damage control and resource extraction. I was a liability now. That's why she didn't argue when I threw her out. That's why she didn't cry when our daughter rejected her. She'd already decided none of us were coming with her. So I went hunting. Not literally. I'm not that guy. But I know people. And more importantly, I know how to be quiet. Which is something she never expected from me. I started with the gym. Not the gym she went to. The one she said she went to. I'd never been inside before. I always stayed with the kids when she went on her late cardio sessions. Turns out she hadn't scanned in there for over 4 months. Not once. So I asked the manager, young guy, early 20s, if he remembered her. Tall, brown hair, kind of intense eyes, he said. Yeah, I haven't seen her in a while. But she used to come in with a guy sometimes. Tall, older, bald? Greg, did they ever meet anyone else here? He thought for a second. Once, maybe twice. Some guy who always wore a hoodie. Never worked out. Just sat in the smoothie bar. I left before I blew my cover. On the way out, I dropped $50 into the manager's tip jar and said, if you see her again, give me a call. Next stop was her favorite cafe, the place she always claimed she went to write, which is hilarious because the only thing she's written in years are lies. I showed the barista a photo. Her face twisted. She used to come in with 3 different guys, she said. Weird vibe. Never at the same time, but similar energy. Not boyfriend energy. Like team energy. I asked if she'd ever paid in cash. She never paid, she said. The guys always did. Different names on the cards each time. And then she pulled out a receipt. I don't know why she kept it, but God bless her for being messy. The name on the receipt wasn't Greg or Ethan. It was my last name. My old card, one I thought we'd shredded months ago. She must have duplicated it before canceling it. That's when I knew she wasn't sloppy. She was arrogant. She thought I'd never catch up. That I was always 2 steps behind. She forgot what kind of man I am when I stopped trusting. That night, after putting the kids to sleep again, I called Tyler. Can you get me into her phone? There was a pause. You have it? No, I said. But I know where it'll be. We spent an hour going over how to clone a device remotely. I won't get into the details, too risky, but it involved a dummy cloud login, 2 MAC addresses, and a trigger phrase. It was complicated, but doable. I prepped everything. All I needed now was her to text me. So I baited her. We need to talk. One last time. In person. No kids. Tomorrow. She replied instantly. Fine. But make it quick. I'm not interested in drama. Same cold tone. No remorse. No cracks in her armor. But that was fine. Because the second she walked into that cafe tomorrow, her phone would connect to the signal booster in my backpack. And everything she'd been hiding? Every message, every photo, every plan? Would be mine. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to pull the ground out from under her feet. And I wouldn't even have to raise my voice to do it. She walked in like nothing ever touched her. Sunglasses on. Hair done. wearing that same beige coat she always wore when she wanted to look composed, expensive, and untouchable. The kind of look that says I've moved on before she even opens her mouth. But her eyes gave her away. A flicker, just for a second, when she saw I was already sitting. Calm. No bags under my eyes. No trembling hands. Just a coffee, a plain notebook, and the bag sitting under my chair where the booster quietly siphoned her phone's entire soul into Tyler's inbox. She sat across from me. Didn't even order anything. Let's get this over with, she said, folding her arms like she was the one doing me the favor. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence settle. The same way you let water go still before you drop in the poison. Then I said, you made a mistake. She snorted. You're still on this? I already told you I didn't steal. The money was ours. You're not dragging me into some guilt trip because you couldn't keep your marriage from rotting. There it was. Her new narrative. I was the failure. She was the escape artist. Greg's account is frozen, I said flatly. That got her attention. She blinked once. Just once. But I caught it. How do you know that? She asked. I know Ethan's being audited too, I added. And your third friend? The one who likes hoodies and keeps burner phones in a bag with a cracked Apple logo? He's being watched. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her jaw tightened. Her mouth stayed in this frozen half-smile, like she hadn't decided whether to lie or attack yet. I leaned forward. You thought I was soft. You thought I wouldn't dig. You thought I'd cry and fold and hand you the house and walk away with my tail tucked because you smiled during the ambush. Still no reply, so I dropped the real bomb. I cloned your phone. That landed. She didn't flinch, but her body changed. The hands on the table curled into fists. The smile cracked. She sat up straight, leaned forward, and in a whisper, she said, You think you're clever. I don't think. I know. And then I slid the notebook across the table. On the first page, a printed screenshot of a message she sent to Ethan, dated 2 weeks ago. If he finds out, I'll bury him in custody court. He won't survive without the kids. He's still so desperate to be the good guy. It's almost sad. She stared at it like she wanted to rip it apart. But she didn't, because she knew I didn't bring just one page. I brought all of them. Photos, voice memos, calendar appointments, 3 separate identities used for banking, 2 email addresses she'd never mentioned, and 1 document, still open on her phone just this morning, outlining a fake domestic abuse claim she was planning to file next month against me. That one I circled in red. You were going to burn me, I said. Take the money, the house, the kids, and make me look like a threat. You already drafted it. All you had to do was pick a bruise. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, calmly, she asked, What do you want? That was the moment I saw the real her. No fake guilt. No victim act. Just raw strategy. She was treating this like a business negotiation now, because that's what it had always been to her. I want you gone, I said. Not just from the house. From everything. You don't fight for custody. You don't touch another cent. You don't exist in our lives after this. She laughed, quiet and sharp. You can't make me disappear. I don't have to, I said, standing. You already did that yourself. I'm just showing you the paperwork. Then I slid the final envelope across the table. Inside was a printed draft of a civil suit. Fraud, identity misuse, wire fraud, conspiracy. Names redacted for now. But enough evidence to trigger real noise. Enough to make Greg and Ethan run far and fast. If I file this, I said, you lose everything. But if you walk away now, and I mean fully, you might still have time to save yourself. She looked at the envelope like it was a grenade. Her fingers hovered over it. Trembled for the first time. You wouldn't do that, she whispered. I smiled. You thought I was soft. Then I walked out. Let her sit with that. Let her finally understand the one thing she never considered. Some men don't fall apart. Some men wait. And then they bury you without ever raising their voice. The wind was different that day. Not metaphorically, I mean actually. Crisp, sharp, like the air itself had cleaned up its act. The kind of weather that makes you roll the window down just to feel something honest hit your skin. I drove home from that cafe with my chest unclenched for the first time in months. The rage had drained out of me, not from forgiveness, don't get that twisted, but because I had something better than anger now. Control. I didn't need her tears. I didn't need her confession. I had truth. And in this game, truth isn't emotional. It's a weapon. And I had it locked and loaded in triplicate. By the time I got home, Tyler had already sent a ping. Full data clone successful. Every folder, app, photo, and message synced to a private server with offsite backup. I had everything, even the deleted drafts. One of them, a message she'd started typing 3 days ago but never sent. If this goes wrong, I can always use the kids. He'll do anything to protect them. That's my leverage. I stared at it for a long time. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer. We'd already spoken briefly the day before, but now I had enough to ignite the sun. I booked a full consultation, custody, asset protection, a forensic audit of all shared finances. Every move she made from here on out would be watched, documented, preserved. No more threats, no more waiting. But I didn't just want legal firepower. I wanted a witness. So that night I called her sister. They weren't close, some buried feud about a vacation gone wrong and taking sides during a family funeral, but I remembered something. A throwaway line from last year. She always thought she was smarter than everyone. Even me. That stuck with me. Her sister answered like she wasn't sure it was real. You're calling me? I have something you need to see, I said. And you're going to want to. We met the next morning at a diner halfway between our cities. She looked tired. Worn. Like life had done its damage already but left her standing just to be cruel. I showed her the messages first. The real ones. The unfiltered ones. Not just the cheating. The planning. The contempt. The deliberate harm. At first she was just quiet. Then her hand went to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. She said you were losing it. She told me you were paranoid. Controlling. That you tracked her because you were obsessed. I nodded. That's how she framed it to everyone. She said the marriage was basically dead. That you weren't affectionate. That you ignored her. She said I was weak, I said. That I'd never see it coming. And then I showed her the draft of the fake abuse claim. Her sister broke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just this quiet, horrified sigh that came from somewhere deep, like she just found out a car crash she passed on the highway was her own blood. You're going to fight her, aren't you? I looked her dead in the eyes. I'm not fighting her. I'm removing her. Carefully. Legally. Permanently. She nodded slowly. Then, without prompting, she reached into her purse. I still have her spare keys, she said. From when I used to feed the cat. That night, I used those keys. No, not to do anything illegal. I let myself into her apartment. Yes, she'd already found one, and I left something on the counter. A single flash drive. Labeled, "Watch me burn it all." Just the title. No note. No threat. No context. Let her plug it in. Let her heart race as she realizes everything she deleted lives forever. Let her wonder which of her partners are still loyal and which are flipping to save themselves. Because here's the thing about people like her. They never believe the end is real until everyone's already left the theater. She wanted leverage. She wanted power. She wanted to rewrite the narrative. Now she has nothing. And I'm still only halfway done. It happened faster than I expected. By Monday morning, her lawyer reached out. Not to challenge custody, not to negotiate the house, not to even posture. Just one message. My client is prepared to discuss terms for an uncontested divorce. Uncontested. That word hit different. Not because it meant peace, but because it meant surrender. The woman who once bragged to Ethan about how she'd own me in court was now folding before the first hearing. She'd seen the flash drive, and she knew. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I forwarded the message to my own lawyer, with a short note. We don't discuss. We dictate. See, here's what people like her never understand. When you betray someone who's willing to carry you through your worst, you don't just lose their love. You lose the version of yourself that was protected by it. And without me, she was exposed. By Wednesday, Tyler had sent me something else. A data dump, fresh, this time from her fake email account. She'd logged in briefly, probably to check if anything could still be salvaged. But she left her session open long enough for Tyler to grab one last gem. It was a message to the third man. Not Greg. Not Ethan. The one we still hadn't identified. The message was short, frantic, and very unlike her. He has everything. I think he's bluffing, but if he's not, we need to cut off contact. Don't respond. He'll try to bait you. Just disappear. I read it 3 times. Dissected every word. And then it hit me. She wasn't just scared. She was alone. Because Greg? He ghosted her. His company was already under audit. And Ethan? According to Tyler, he transferred $60,000 to a Cayman account and disconnected every known number within 48 hours of me confronting her. But the third guy? The ghost in the hoodie? He vanished too. They left her. The second the fire got real, she wasn't worth the smoke. That's how it always is in these little partnerships of betrayal. Loyalty is a fantasy until the police knock on the wrong door. But here's the twist. I didn't send anything to the police. Not yet. Because I wanted one more thing. I wanted her to ask for mercy. And sure enough, it came the next day. She showed up at the house. Middle of the afternoon. No warning. No text. Just stood on the porch like she was still entitled to the space, wearing sunglasses again, but this time not to look cool. This time to hide what was underneath. I didn't open the door. I watched her through the camera feed, phone in hand, as she knocked twice, then 3 times, then just stood there. Finally, she pulled out her phone. One text. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'll say what you need to hear. I waited. Then replied, I don't need to hear anything. But they do. I opened the door. The kids were behind me. Not because I planned it. Because they were already watching from the stairs. She froze when she saw them. Her posture collapsed. She looked small. Not the woman who mocked me behind my back. Not the one who smirked at evidence. Just a hollow shell wrapped in the clothes of someone who used to matter. I'm sorry, she whispered. No performance. No mask. Just that. But it wasn't enough. Because my daughter, my brave, broken, healing daughter, looked her straight in the face and said, you said Dad was weak. Silence. And you said we'd forget. That we'd be fine without him. She didn't even deny it. She just took off the sunglasses. Red eyes. No makeup. Hair undone. Finally, the truth wore her face. I was wrong, she said. But my daughter had already turned away. And my youngest, the one who used to run to her every morning, leaned into my side and said quietly, can she go now? That was it. Not a scream. Not a slap. Not a scene. Just a child choosing peace. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, and stood in front of her. You'll sign what we send. You'll give up custody. You'll walk away from the house, the accounts, everything. You'll rebuild your life far from here, and you'll do it quietly. She nodded. I'll keep your secrets, I said. But only if you stay gone. And for the first time since this all began, she didn't argue. She didn't win. She just walked down the steps. And never looked back. The house feels different now. Not quieter. Not emptier. Cleaner. Like every shadow has been scrubbed from the walls, like the air finally belongs to us again. The laughter that fills it now doesn't have to tiptoe around tension. The silence between conversations doesn't feel like a trap. It's just peace. Real peace. It's been 3 months since she walked down those steps. She signed everything. Custody. Full. Assets. Untouched. No visitation. No shared holidays. No maybe someday. Just a clean surgical cut. My lawyer said it was the fastest full custody grant he'd ever seen in this county. The judge read the documentation, glanced once at the evidence packet, and signed without blinking. She didn't contest. She didn't even show. She knew better. And the best part? I didn't have to destroy her to win. I just exposed her. When truth walks into the room, lies don't get a seat at the table. Tyler's still sitting on everything: backup drives, encrypted files, digital insurance. Not because I want to use them, but because I need to know they exist. Insurance, not revenge. I'm not playing her game anymore. I burned the playbook. The kids, they're healing. It's not a straight line. Some nights are rough, Some questions still sting. But there's a softness in our home again. My daughter draws again. She leaves the door open when she sleeps. She hugs me longer now. Tight. Like she's anchoring herself to something steady. My boys still ask about her. Not every day. Less and less. I answer when I have to. But I don't lie. I just simplify the truth until it fits into their world. She made some really bad choices. They nod. That's enough for now. And me? I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm free. Not just from her, but from the man I had to become while loving someone who saw me as disposable. That version of me, the man constantly second-guessing, shrinking himself, rationalizing red flags, he's gone too. And in his place, someone I actually recognize, someone who pays attention, who doesn't apologize for his boundaries, who can look his kids in the eye and say, "We are safe now. We are okay." Let me tell you something, if you're still reading this and stuck in that limbo where things feel off but you keep telling yourself it's just stress or distance or a phase, trust your gut. Not your fear. Not your hope. Your gut. Because you know. You always know. The signs don't come in fireworks. They come in forgettable moments, changed passwords, skipped dinners, silence where there used to be jokes, eye contact that doesn't land, stories that shrink when you ask questions. Pay attention. And if you have kids, you fight with every cell in your body to protect their world. Not with violence. Not with vengeance. With clarity. With truth. With quiet strength that doesn't need to be loud to be undeniable. She thought she'd burn the house down on her way out. But she forgot I built the foundation. And when the smoke cleared, I was still standing. So no, she didn't ruin me. She revealed me. And I'll never let someone like her into my world again.